Hello everyone, this is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole Lore and Fray, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon. Well, it's time for me to start talking a little bit more about the alternative platforms, the ones that nobody wants to play on, but everyone wants to pretend are the next big thing. Xbox and PlayStation. This has been a thing on my mind for the past several months or so. There's a lot of topics to talk about when it comes to Xbox and PlayStation and what they're doing right now and how they can't compete with Nintendo and all that. But right now, I do think the narrative has kind of like they've kind of established a narrative at this point, is that like Switch is going to get left in the dust because Xbox and PlayStation are too powerful, and the real game developers, the third parties, they have to develop for the new powerful hardware, because only that piece of hardware can support the games that they want to make. And I really want you guys to think about this narrative, really think about it hard, because we have not fully transitioned over to next gen yet. People don't want to admit it. People are ignoring this, but Elden Ring, Hogwarts Legacy, and Resident Evil 4 are all available on last generation platforms. That's right. RE4 Remake is available on the PS4. Hogwarts Legacy is available on everything, in PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch, coming in July. And of course, Elden Ring got last gen versions for PS4 and Xbox One. I really want you to think about this for a minute. Isn't it interesting how developers have no problem developing cross-gen ports for PS4 and Xbox One, but conveniently, every single time they seem to skip the Switch version, right? Every single time they make up some excuse, some justification, and try to pretend that the Switch cannot run their games. And that simply is not the case. Switch absolutely can run Resident Evil 4 Remake. It can run Elden Ring. It can run Hogwarts Legacy. It's getting a late port, but it is coming. It can run all these games, right? It did run Doom Eternal. I remember back when people were trying to say it couldn't run Witcher 3, right? I remember people making up excuse after excuse after excuse about, why developers can't support the Switch, and now with this next generation of hardware, they're going back to their old tricks of pretending the Switch is so weak it can't handle these things. But the thing is, the Switch isn't being the reason the Switch is not being supported has nothing to do with the hardware power. It has everything to do with Sony and how they pay off developers to not support Nintendo hardware. We know this happens. It was in their Monster Hunter World contract. It's they don't care about Xbox, especially in Japan, but they specifically want to drive Nintendo out of the hardware space. So this is the thing that's been happening for years, right? Across a wide range of generations. It's why you see so many Japanese developers attack Nintendo and make weird statements about it, like that Danganronpa guy who tried to pretend he didn't know what a Switch was, right? You have Negotiate refusing to port Yakuza to Nintendo consoles. You have all these Nintendo, all these Japanese games that are clearly lower end and clearly are able to be ported to the Switch. Yakuza is a great example. Persona was a great example, but coincidentally, they don't come until way after the other versions of the game. And it's entirely because PlayStation is specifically has always used third parties to try and to weaponize them against Nintendo by presenting this narrative that all this variety from all these other developers, all the real talent in the industry is on our platform. So even if Nintendo gets a Resident Evil 2 port or something, oh man, PS1, it has 1, 2, and 3, right? It has the best version of all those games. So why would you get a Nintendo console, right? Even though that there was nothing really stopping Resident Evil from coming to Nintendo hardware. It was from a technological perspective, it was entirely just a business thing, right? Final Fantasy VII was the same way. Metal Gear Solid was the same way. Unless Nintendo cuts a deal with a company to produce an exclusive title, a timed exclusive title, what happened with Live Alive and stuff like that. A lot of these games just do not come out on Nintendo hardware at all. And it's entirely because of how nepotistic Sony is and how much control they have over the industry. And so many people don't understand this. So many people like genuinely seem to think it's about the hardware, while ignoring the fact that, last gen pieces of hardware, PS3, old generations of PlayStation, get supported for a ludicrously long time, right? PS2 was getting new games until 2012, right? Persona 4 came out in 2008, right? The Vita got support, despite selling 13 million units, less than the Wii U, I think. How many people do you see talk about how the Vita was a flop and how it drove Sony out of the handheld business? Nobody talks about it. It's not something people talk about, but it's still got a bunch of third-party games, good ones too. Ys 8 came out on that thing, right? Ys 8 is awesome. I remember seeing Marvel vs. Capcom Ultimate got ported to it, and I just wonder, where is there an audience for that on there? Mortal Kombat 9 got ported. Mortal Kombat 9 has never been reported to a Nintendo console ever, right? And you can't argue that and say that there is no audience for these games on Switch, because there absolutely is. If Mortal Kombat 9 came out on Switch, I would buy that in a heartbeat, right? But it's not there. It's not available, right? They're not there. The third parties want you to buy games on PlayStation and Xbox so they can keep getting these sweet exclusive deals from these companies. Xbox is paying developers to shill Game Pass for them. Oh man, Game Pass, it's made us so much money, because Microsoft paid you to say that, right? It's not because the service itself is popular or successful. It's because Microsoft is just throwing money around, essentially. You have Sony doing backroom deals with these developers, taking Negotiate out to dinners and stuff like that. You have, real corruption in this industry, right? Again, it has nothing to do with the hardware. And I really want this myth to die. I really want people to look around and realize that the narrative they're pushing just does not make any sense. Switch can't run video games? Are you serious? Game developers are making games too ambitious to the Switch. Where are they? I don't see a single game on PS5 or Series X that can't run on Switch. Right? There's nothing like that. Despite what you've been saying all this time, despite your arguments, I've never seen a game like that. It just doesn't exist. All they would have to do is just put real work into a port, a really good, well-made Switch version, but they just don't do it, right? Square Enix won't even produce a proper Kingdom Hearts collection on Switch, right? It's still cloud only, in spite of the fact that most of the games are clearly playable on Switch, right? Kingdom Hearts 1 is PS2, early PS2, that. There's no way that wouldn't run on Switch properly. No way at all. And yet we're still getting this narrative that cloud-based gaming on Switch is a thing purely because of the hardware, and not because developers are just deliberately trying to gimp the Switch versions, right? In order to promote their the real version on Switch on PS5, right? The version they want you to support. They're trying to pressure you into continue supporting PS5 and Series X. And I really do think we're at that point now where it's just not going to work anymore, right? It does kind of feel like more and more people are acknowledging that oh wait, this doesn't make any sense. Why would I buy a PS5 after the PS4 was so disappointing, right? This is the best year for PS5 ever, and I'm still noticing that the sales haven't really gone up. Switch outdid PS5 this week. And this was the week that RE4 launched, and Final Fantasy 16 is on the way. This is going to be I think the PS5's best year in its entire lifespan, and yet there's nothing. There's no real enthusiasm for this console at all. In fact, right now, all they can do, all I've seen from my YouTube comment section is trying to say that Resident Evil 4 Remake is one of the best games ever made because it's a remake of a GameCube exclusive, apparently, and it's going to win Game of the Year over Tears of the Kingdom, which I think everyone thinks is stupid. It's not going to be something that is even up for debate by the time Tears of the Kingdom comes out, and especially by Game Award season. It's such a weird thing, seeing these guys try and latch onto anything they possibly can to try and downplay Nintendo consoles. I've seen people hype up Pizza Tower. I've seen people hype up Hogwarts Legacy, it's just all these like terrible games, right? That are being like pushed on us right now. I don't think I think we're at the point now where like the Switch equivalents are just way better. Fire Emblem Three Houses is a better Harry Potter game than Hogwarts Legacy is. Like it's weird to say that considering they're really nothing alike, but when you get right down to it, like yeah, it's a better Harry Potter game. You have like better open world games with Tears of the Kingdom. You have like, better titles, better games, better franchises, better online play, better features. Like it's like what exactly about PS5 and Series X is like so new and cutting edge that like I absolutely have to get one. I have never in my entire life heard a proper explanation as to what makes these consoles so great. Like back in the day, like people would like scream at you about like blast processing and stuff like that. Like they didn't know what it was. They didn't know what it did. They just knew that like Sega had it and Nintendo did it, and that's what made Sega better. Like it's the same thing, honestly. Like people are just screaming at you about how the Switch is inferior because it's underpowered, without really taking into consideration that the Switch is simply has the better games. It is simply a better experience. And right now they're trying to use like emulation and piracy as like a cope. Like, I see so many people like try to justify the Steam Deck as being successful because like, oh, you can just play all the Nintendo games on it, which isn't true. You'll never be able to play Nintendo Switch Sports on it. You can't play like online games, right? Like it's so strange to see them like present this narrative that these consoles are in any way, especially the Steam Deck, is in any way competitive against Nintendo consoles. I don't think it's really a mainstream thing. I think it's like purely just like online fanaticism that's just going to stick around for a good long while because lots of people are still like crazy about the Vita, right? I know Colin Moriarty, the guy who wrote that infamous like the Vita will destroy the 3DS article. That guy still shills the Vita, right? Like there are plenty of people who like hype that thing up while like downplaying the Switch. Like it's so weird to see, but like hating Nintendo for a lot of people is like an integral part of the video game culture, right? They don't actually think about like its value as a hardware brand or like what they can offer to the table. Like to them, like Nintendo is only successful because of like its nostalgic IPs, which you can easily emulate on a Steam Deck, according to them. And they don't really appreciate like the talent and the work and just like what they put out at an affordable price point, like because it's underpowered. What does that even mean? It's just a cope. Like when you get right down to it, like these people are just angry that Nintendo has been dominating them since like the 90s. Okay, like in a way, so PlayStation and Xbox have never really had anything on Nintendo. Like everything they've put up to this point has been smoke and mirrors, and like over the past couple of years, those smoke and mirrors have been like dissipating or like breaking outright. Right? So many like games have just like fallen by the wayside. It's really hard to really believe that Nintendo is ever going to fade from the console space at this point. Like the days of like pretending that Switch is on the verge of Nintendo is on the verge of going third party are long gone. It just isn't going to happen. And I'm very curious to see just what people will be doing like 10 years from now. When piracy starts getting cracked down on, when people begin to see through like the hatred and just the narrative, and like when people start growing past it, honestly, because I don't think it's something that like a lot of younger people will experience, honestly. Like casual gamers will have their phones and their PCs, but like core integral players will be Nintendo players, right? They will have respect for this brand, for the brand and the hardware, and like it's 50 years of just high quality experience, right? 15 years from now, I don't think it like legit. 50 years worth of great games from Nintendo. Like at that point, it'll be kind of difficult saying that the company has no value or that it's not doing anything new or innovative because they'll have like evolved and grown across like a long period of time, right? Like it just isn't going to play out the way that so many people think it will with Nintendo going bankrupt. Like I I'm getting very tired of seeing like these people constantly railing on the Switch, really for no reason, on Nintendo in general. Because right now the thing they're doing is like saying that like because the Switch is so underpowered that's why they need the Switch too. But you just know that like when the next Nintendo console is announced, like my official statement has been always been that like it's going to be 2027, 10 years after launch. Like when the Switch 2 finally does get announced, well, when the new Nintendo console finally does get announced, these people are going to turn on that as well, right? They turn on the Wii U, they turned on the Switch, they turn on the 3DS, like anything to suit the narrative, anything to suit the anti-Nintendo narrative, they'll be pushing. We will see the same sort of people going after the Switch, the new Nintendo console. And I have to ask, like, are we going to take those people seriously? Like, are we really going to keep listening to these people who aren't pleased by anything? I don't think so. I don't care what they think. I don't think you should care what they think. And I think you should just enjoy your Nintendo games on your Nintendo Switch.